I'm thrilled to be able to introduce our keynote speakers, Ashley Wilson and Ellen Parker. And I'm kind of proud because they're both at University Presbyterian Church, and we did a Sunday school series on the anxious generation, so that's where it came about. But let's see, Ellen is a licensed professional counselor. She's worked at UPC preschool since 2009, and she has a varied experience. She's worked at the developmental evaluation clinic, at the Council on Alcohol and Drug Abuse. And I'm going to move on now to Ashley so I don't use up all the time for the speeches. So Ashley is a retired family nurse practitioner, and she's chair of the Mental Health Task Force at University Presbyterian Church. You too could have a mental health task force at your churches and faith communities. Anyhow, I love what she wrote to say. She is a mom of kids in her 20s. She witnessed the beginning of the phone-based childhood and has watched its effects in real time. So let's welcome Ashley and Ellen. Thank you.
Good morning, and I'm actually going to ask Meg, can you go ahead and take us to the first slide? I saw this on a coaster last week, and it made me both laugh a little and cringe a lot. So I want to say that hopefully by the end of the workshop today, you won't feel as doomed as this message would have you believe, because there is hope. So yes, as Debbie said, I have I've had the privilege and the blessing to work with children over 30 years now. I started right out of graduate school as a school counselor and worked with ages pre-K all the way through 12th. I have 3 now young adult children of my own. And for the past 16 years, I have been in the early education realm at University Presbyterian Preschool. I serve as the director there. One of my favorite things to do professionally is to be on the floor playing with children, interacting, being part of their imaginative space. I also love conversations with parents and strategizing with my teachers about things we can do to stimulate the children. One of my least favorite things to do, ironically, is to speak publicly, but here I am. And I just say that so that you know how important Ashley and I feel like this topic of conversation is. We share, along with many of you, concerns about the current experience of childhood. And so I have felt, as an educator, a sort of obligation to share what we're seeing in the classroom, so that maybe, hopefully, you all will get nuggets that you can help articulate to your populations why there is this concern. So I will say, if you'll take us to the next one, yeah. About 11 years ago was the first time somebody articulated to me that we had something to be concerned about. We had a class come in through our preschool where we didn't just have 1 or 2 children who were struggling in the classroom, but we had almost half the class really struggling in different ways. Some had trouble focusing attention. Some had trouble just with basic social skills. Some had trouble controlling their body. They were pushing and shoving and grabbing. Some had trouble regulating their emotions, dealing with everyday occurrences of, even for 3 and 4-year-olds, you know, how you deal with your blocks being knocked over or somebody saying something. We saw a change in how children were reacting. What I did that year is I brought in an educational consultant to observe the class and give us some ideas on what we could what we were doing wrong, if anything, what we could do differently. And she was the first person who pointed out that what we were seeing was happening in classrooms all across the country and at multiple age groups. This change of behavior with more challenging behaviors, both internal and external challenges, and that she and her colleagues attributed a lot of this change to the decline in opportunities to play for children. That concern has continued for us here in Chapel Hill at our age group. The educators I speak to at other age group levels and across the country share the same concerns. And the concerns have grown too. We now have kindergarten teachers who will tell you that children are showing up in the kindergarten classroom not ready to do the work. Their fingers and their wrist strength is weak, so they have trouble holding scissors and pencils. Their core strength is weak, so they have difficulty sitting in chairs or sitting on the floor at circle time. Even when the curriculum is developmentally appropriate, they're struggling in these ways. So we know that something's going on. Those of us with boots on the ground know that something's going on. We, of course, can't put children in a lab to raise them. That wouldn't be ethical, so we can't directly say this is being caused by any one or two things. So the best we can do is look at what we know about brain development, especially in young children, and then we look at correlating data and try to put the pieces together. Those are the things I want to focus on today, is some speculations about why we're seeing a decline in play, which is resulting in the behavioral concerns that we're seeing. The three things I'm going to focus on, I'm sure there are other complicating factors. One is, of course, the use of technology in children, by children. Equally concerning is the use of technology by the adults who are caring for those children. And the last thing is some parenting trends that have changed the experience and the opportunities children have for play and for social interaction. So starting with what we know. We know that humans are mammals, and we know that mammals all have a designated period of life in their childhood that is evolved and hardwired with an instinct for a drive to play. And the reason that we have that play in that period of life is to help develop critical skills for survival, for social interactions, and for cognitive functioning. So play is vital, and it is a biological need that we as humans have. Actually, go back one, will you? So our pictures here, these kind of bring back my memories. Hopefully they stimulate some nostalgic memories of your own, of maybe ways you spent your childhood. Some people might look at these and consider these children as taking a break, or some might even say wasting time, happily wasting time. But what child development experts will tell you is that there is so much valuable brain development happening in each of these pictures, so much that these children are learning, and this is the way they learn. They're not going to learn the social interactions. They're not going to learn their capabilities sitting, doing something at a desk or on a device, but really they learn it in the real world and through playful interactions. So again, key facts that we know about brain development and how important this time of life is for children. The brain is growing incredibly rapidly. That first statement should say more than 1 million neural connections are formed each second in the first few years of life. So all of the experiences that our children are having are critical, especially during that time period. The brain is developing, 90% of it is developed by the time the children are 5. That's how important that period of life is. The brain continues to develop. We have another burst of brain development around adolescence, but the brain is not considered fully formed until our early 20s. And so that's why we have age restrictions on drinking, because we know that alcohol is even more harmful for children whose brains aren't fully developed. So we set the age at 21. So really, brains are not fully formed until our early 20s. And one other thing we know about brain development from research is there is a very strong research base that tells us how important it is for children to have free playtime to get what they need for their brain to develop healthily. So lots of good things are happening with our brains when we play. We have neural circuits that are being activated. We have new neural pathways that are being formed with each play experience. These circuits, these pathways are helping develop cognitive functioning. They're helping develop physical agility. They're helping develop that emotional regulation and the social skills. And equally important for this group today is we actually have neuroimaging studies that tell us that chemicals are released during play that promote feelings of well-being, and they decrease feelings of stress. They actually decrease stress hormones that are being released. That's true not only for children, that's true for adults too. So then we get to how children are spending their time today. Also, like the quote from the coaster, a little bit funny, but also very cringy, right? This type of site is becoming more and more common. We cringe a little bit or a lot because of what we do know about play and the value of play for children. And when we take opportunities for the children, when they could be playing and we replace it with something else, we're robbing them of the experience, those exact biological driven need that they have to play and all of the great things that happen when they do play. They're not getting that. The other thing we're doing is we are now introducing a new type of wiring for their brains that are driven by these type of devices. So for instance, the device may, a lot of them, the children are passive learners. They don't control when the video games or the videos, they don't control the start or the end of those video games. They also don't control the pacing of the video games. So it's a constant level of energy going on. So as opposed to these children, if they'd been playing red light, green light, they'd be able to learn and practice, start, stop. And in our preschool, we do yellow light, go slow. These are good activities to get children used to and practicing those type of behaviors. With a video device, that doesn't happen. Video content is also immediate. It provides children with the expectation of immediate gratification. So waiting, it becomes harder and harder for these children because they don't have opportunities to practice kind of what they would in a normal flow of play, where you have to sometimes wait turns and you sometimes have to wait for things to happen. And then the last concerning thing that's happening with brain development introduced to digital technology is we are starting to learn more and more from neuroimaging again that there are reward pathways that are stimulated by these video devices, by these digital devices, the same reward pathways that get stimulated by addictive behaviors like gambling. So think about that for a minute. All of our other addictive mediums, alcohol, gambling, those don't get introduced for most people until later on, at least their teenage years. This is the first time we have an addictive medium that's being introduced at this young of age when the brain is still so plastic. We really don't know the full impact on this. Again, we can't study it in a lab. So again, we're really reliant on the correlating data that's gonna let us know when we see changes and what those changes are gonna be. So here we have children, they're maybe on the sideline of their sibling's soccer game, or maybe at a picnic. Go to the next one. In a car, on car trips, I find a lot of parents, it's not just the long car trips, some parents use it even for short little trips to the store or 5 or 10 minute trips. The children are used to getting devices in their hands. Also common to see this at grocery stores now and grocery carts, yes. Next one. And then of course, I'm sure you all have been in restaurants lately and have seen exactly this. This is also happening in people's homes. So, you know, a lot of concern about all the play opportunities that are missed in each of these examples, the social interactions that could have occurred on those soccer sidelines with the siblings, maybe some risky behavior that they could try out and find out what's okay and what's not. The child riding in the car could have been looking out the window wondering about what they see. Maybe the parent is driving and is able to point out things and help direct the child's attention. Look, there's an excavator. It's working. I wonder what it's doing, and help scaffold the child so that they're learning, oh, we're both looking at this and we're both wondering about this together. Instead, the child's isolated on their device. And in this situation, you could take the device away from the child, but you still have two adults who are caring for the child who are on their devices. And that's the second area I wanted to talk about. We actually have a term for this now. It's called technoference. The interference of technology in parent-child interactions and its impact on child development. That definition, I would prefer it to actually say adult interactions, not just parent-child, because our children are growing up in a community of teachers, of grandparents, of people who are around them. And there is a modeling concern, of course. Now our children are growing up where it's commonplace for them to see phones in everybody's hands, and when we have to wait and do something, or if we're a little bored, or we need an immediate answer, they're seeing that, and they're gonna learn to model that. But even more concerning, or at least equally concerning, is the lack of interaction that's happening when the children are on, or when the adults are on their devices. We, at our preschool, we have this app that we use to communicate with parents, and we have the teachers upload pictures. They take them during the day so that the parents can see their child in action, engaging in different ways and with different children, and the parents love it. We actually got rid of that feature and have told the parents we are no longer taking pictures during the day or sending them. Because we do not want to be part of that problem. We do not want to be another adult like the child in this cartoon who is growing up with a parent's face behind the camera. I think a lot of adults don't even think about that. When they think about phone use, they're thinking about scrolling and checking work emails, but it's also the camera that creates a physical block between the adult and the child. Next one. So yes, some emerging research that we know on technoference and the impact on children. So in one study, they studied parents who had infants and measured the amount of time the parents were on their cell phones, and it was 27%. So that's over a quarter of their day. And of course, we parents, we adults, we can't attend and stimulate our children 100% of the time all day long. That's not good for them, and it's not expected. There's life to attend to, there's chores and tasks and work that we have to do, but this 27% is in addition to that. So children are getting 27% less interaction with their adults. Another study, they studied families during mealtime. They found that when adults had their phones active, that they were verbally communicating 20% less with the children and had 39% less eye contact. That one hit me in my gut. That one made me sick, because if you think about all the important things that children learn, young children, but even our older children or teenagers learn from direct eye contact. They learn reading facial expressions. They learn just connecting with other humans, the verbal communication. They learn the serve and return of interactions. I say something, you respond, I say it back, and building on each other. They learn problem solving. They learn so much valuable learning just from social interactions like this. And then when we introduce the phones and reduce that, that's that much less learning they're getting. And overall, research is supporting that we, of course, are more distracted when our phones are out. So we're less responsive in all the important ways to the children, including monitoring their safety. All right. So, the next area I was going to focus on is the trends that we're starting to see in parenting and how these might be decreasing the play and social interaction space for our children. One of the number one things, I think Jonathan Haidt does a great job of talking about this in Anxious Generation, we're reducing the exposure our children have to physical risk. We, of course, don't ever want people to get hurt. We don't want our children to get hurt, but taking risks is something we're biologically predisposed to want to try to do. And so when we're children, we learn by taking little risks. We learn what we're physically capable of. We learn our limits. We learn not to do that again. And we also learn about our own resilience. So when we take that amount of physical risk away from children, we've basically shrunk that experience that they are able to get from that. It shows up on the playground early on. It shows up later when we introduce bikes for kids or even letting them drive. I know more and more families are delaying letting their children drive because of anxiety they have about the child's physical risk. And the other thing we're doing by limiting the children in this way is we're projecting our own anxiety onto the children. So our message to the children is, you can't handle this. We, as your loving adults, parents, grandparents, we don't feel like you can handle this. There's a reason to be scared. So they grow up with that mindset. Similar to physical risk, we also have emotional risks that children take and emotional experiences. And we have definitely noticed as of late a parenting trend for low tolerance for allowing children to feel those negative emotions. And again, we don't want children to feel failure, disappointment, and sadness, but it's so important for them to learn that, especially early on when the stakes are lower. Because when they get older, what you end up seeing is what, if you know people or have people that, or maybe some of you are at the college level, we have parents who are calling professors to intervene with grades. We have parents calling teachers to try to control social interactions at even older ages, trying to control who their children are around and exposed to because they don't want their child to have those negative experiences. If they don't have them, they'll never learn the skills of how to cope with them. And again, the parent sentiment, the adult sentiment is, the message to the child is, we don't think you can handle that. There's a reason to be anxious about that. So we're passing that anxiety on to our children. Third parenting trend, for sure, replacing playtime with activities mistakenly believed to increase the child's chances of success in life. Even though, going back to what we know about brain development, research shows that children with reduced playtime is so important to have that playtime, and if you reduce it, they struggle more with mental health and success later on. My experience is this tends to be somewhat regional in more achievement-driven communities like our community here in the RTP area. We get a lot of parents who are very concerned with making sure their child has enrichment opportunities after school, through the summer, signing their child up for year-round sports at early ages because we don't want them to fall behind. We want them to be able to be success and be competitive later on in life. But what's true nationally is we have replaced play in our early classrooms, both early childhood education and early elementary ages. We've removed play from a lot of the classrooms. Even though the research says that's the way the children play, we're replacing it with things that really are more appropriate for an adult brain, with written activities. Sometimes we get materials that are labeled as play, but they're really not. They really have that academic practice, so we have to be careful about that. Last thing to talk about is we are overestimating how vulnerable children are in the real world and underestimating how vulnerable they are in the virtual world. So a lot of times, if you have a family and they're teenagers at home and they're upstairs playing on their device or doing whatever on their device, The adult may feel more secure. They're not out in their car, they're not out at a party, so it feels safer to them. But what it doesn't recognize is all of the risks that this exposes the child to, risks of online child predators, which has become an increasing risk, even more so than real-world child predators that they might run into in a park, for instance. It also exposes them to risks with social media interactions and video and porn addiction, especially for our boys, which I know Ashley's going to touch more on that information later on. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Ashley.
Thank you, Ellen. And I have to have my glasses and my written out script. I'm even less comfortable public speaking than you are. So Ellen has talked about the importance of play for brain and social development. In his book, The Anxious Generation, Jonathan Haidt lays out lays out evidence that something fundamental changed between the years 2010 and 2015, causing a rapid increase in mental health problems for adolescents, particularly Gen Z, kids born between 1997 and 2012. He shows that childhood changed from play-based to phone-based, and he names this period the Great Rewiring, because the neural pathways that Ellen just taught us about, laying down in the children's brains, actually changed. And this has caused a surge of suffering in mental health that continues today. Next slide, please. So Gen Z was the first generation of kids to go through puberty with smartphones. And puberty is another one of those sensitive brain development stages, similar to the infancy to 5 years old. Prior to year 2007, some kids had flip phones, or sometimes called dumb phones because they're not connected to the internet. Many families had computers which were connected to the internet, but most of these computers were located in the living room where they were shared by everyone and easily supervised. Smartphones changed all that. We put the internet right into our children's hands, and now they had access to everything, everywhere, all at once, and all the time. Parents could no longer easily monitor what children were doing and seeing on those phones. And social media changed for the worse in 2009 when Facebook added the like and the share buttons. And in 2010, phones got front-facing cameras, which made taking selfies and little videos simple. Instagram at this point was only available on smartphones, and in 2012, when Instagram was bought by Facebook, it soared in popularity from 10 million to 90 million users. TikTok has now eclipsed Instagram and Facebook, and teens are spending more and more time on screens. Estimates are that most teens spend 9 hours a day on screens, and this is not in doing schoolwork or homework. This is their leisure time. Thank you. So the book is full of graphs and data showing the synchronized international rise in adolescent anxiety and depression between 2010 and 2015. And I'm only going to show you a few of these graphs, but all of them and much, much more is available for free in the online companion website to the book. You can find it at anxiousgeneration.com/supplement, and there will be a slide with that URL later. And all of these slides will be available, or will be available to you in a PDF that's being shared. So this is anxiety. This graph shows how anxiety skyrocketed for teens and younger adults, and he describes the sudden rise as a hockey stick. Goes along and jumps up like a hockey stick, jumping 160% for teens and 110% for adults under the age of 35, starting in 2010. And it's, oh, you can't really see on this slide, but in all of these slides, graphs, he highlights the area in gray starting with 2010. And it's, I'm sorry, it's not easier to see on this slide. The next slide shows us depression, and the uptick in depression was more pronounced in girls in number of absolute terms, or the number of cases, the rise since 2010, and it shows the hockey stick more clearly, but the rate of increase in depression between boys and girls is roughly equivalent at about 150%. Things got worse around 2020 with the COVID pandemic, when 1 out of every 4 girls reported a major depressive episode. But the rise started in 2010 with the Great Rewiring. So next slide. He goes into a lot of detail in the book, dispelling myths or speculations on why this sudden rise in mental health problems could be related to other factors. And one of them is that it just became fashionable for teens to talk about mental health issues, and they were exaggerating their symptoms. But Haidt looked at emergency room visits for self-harm, suicide attempts, or non-suicidal self-injury such as cutting, and the rate of self-harm for girls nearly tripled in this time. Next slide. And while attempted suicide and self-harm is typically higher for girls, suicide is more prevalent in boys. And the hockey stick is visible in this graph of the suicide rate for adolescent boys during that period of the Great Rewiring. Next slide. So the research shows that girls have been more adversely affected by social media than boys. Gender norms are, of course, generalizations, but this is what the data shows. Most girls are visually oriented and use visually oriented platforms, while boys use text-based platforms. Boys also play a lot of video games and watch a lot of porn. Girls who are heavy users of social media are 3 times more likely to be depressed than non-users. Next slide. There are reasons girls are more vulnerable to the ill effects of social media. Most girls seek communal, relational activities based on sharing thoughts and feelings, and it can be a lot easier to make mean comments online than to say them face to face. And the like and share buttons can exponentially amplify negative comments and make things go viral. Girls' aggression tends to be more focused on damaging relationships and reputations, which is, again, easier to do online, whereas boys' aggression tends to be more physical. You know, it's harder to punch somebody online. Girls are more sensitive to visual comparison, and that is the lifeblood of social media. And as Ellen alluded, the internet has made it much easier for men in most cases to stalk girls and behave badly without accountability. Next slide, please. But boys have not gone unharmed. The safetyism trend that Ellen told us about, we weren't letting boys out, so they were inside and they need something to do, so they're spending more time alone, indoors, on screens, instead of outside, in groups, taking risks, and in developing social skills. And there's a lot of pornography easily available on the internet. Much of it is hardcore and wildly inappropriate for anybody, but particularly young boys who've never even shared a kiss. There are some benefits to video games that boys play together, connected over headphones, and they're talking and interacting with each other, but they're in different locations. This can strengthen friendships, but it's not as good as being together, embodied, and making that eye contact that's so crucial. Many young men are suffering what is called the failure to launch because they've retreated into fantasy lands in their bedrooms instead of maturing in the real world. Hate boils the harms down to 4 specific harms of the phone-based childhood, and we're going to go over each one separately. So the first harm is, next slide please, social deprivation. And this chart shows the decrease in time kids spent hanging out with friends. You really can't see it in this slide, but 2010 and 2015 this is the opposite of the hockey stick. This is where it plummets. Next slide, please. Social media has often increased has increased the quantity of friends that kids have, but it's a decline in the quality of those friendships. And more teens report feeling lonely. And we've all seen this scenario of kids being together but being isolated. The second fundamental harm is sleep deprivation. Teens already need more sleep than younger children and adults for their developing brains. They should get 8 to 10 hours, and this graph shows how more and more are getting less than 7 hours because they have phones in their bedrooms. Next, please. The third is attention fragmentation, and Ellen mentioned this. Notifications interrupt all of us constantly. That phone is buzzing, and multitasking really doesn't exist. They've done studies, and you shift your focus from one task to another. It's not simultaneous, and this is much worse for kids. It interferes with their brain development and their ability to function well. And the final harm is addiction. Video game and social media designers use variable ratio reward schedules to keep their users hooked. We get a hit of dopamine, one of those feel-good hormones, when an action that we do is followed by a reward, such as eating or pain relief. When these actions are not guaranteed, but you get the reward variably on a variable schedule, it's much more addictive. And this is the technique that they use on the slot machines in Las Vegas. So games and social media algorithms use the variable ratio reward schedule on purpose to keep users hooked, and some do become addicted, and sadly this is more common with boys. Okay. Before we leave the harm section, and since we're at a Faith Connections conference, I wanted to discuss the spiritual harm that the phone-based childhood causes. Some philosophers talk about a God-shaped hole within all of us. And if we don't fill this hole with things that are noble and elevated, it's easier for social media to fill that hole with garbage. Haidt identifies as an atheist, but he loudly extols the virtues of and benefits of organized religion and religious and spiritual practices. Worshiping together, engaging in rituals that move us into the elevated realm of the sacred creates cohesive communities. We all learned during the pandemic that virtual communities just are not as satisfying as or meaning-giving as real-world communities. And I know that y'all are also glad to be back together instead of on Zoom. Prayer provides us with a time of stillness, silence, and focus, which is in direct contrast to the fast-paced, often mindless entertainment found on the internet. And most religions urge us to be non-judgmental, slow to anger, and quick to forgive. These are not virtues regularly seen online. Hate encourages parents to keep their kids involved in churches, synagogues, and mosques. So, those were the harms. And there are a lot of them, and it can be overwhelming. But there are reforms, and there are solutions to this that he lays out for us to reverse the course that we are on. And these 4 foundational reforms are no smartphones before high school, no social media before the age of 16, phone-free schools, and giving children far more unsupervised play and independence. No problem, right? This can seem daunting, and many people will say, the train has already left the station, it's too late. But remember, people used to smoke everywhere. And we didn't wear seatbelts. But through collective action, we changed those norms. And when this was on the internet, they were pumping fists, so that slide doesn't illustrate as much. But we need collective action to do the same thing we did with smoking and seatbelts and other ills. And we can't do this alone. So I'm going to go through this somewhat quickly. It's a lot, but it's all in the PDF you'll get, and it's laid out much more beautifully in his book. But he has suggestions for what governments can do, what technological companies can do, what schools can do, and then what parents, guardians, and loved ones can do. Okay. Again, I apologize, the slide has a lot, but governments. The federal government should pass the Kids Online Safety Act, also known as KOSA, which requires companies to assert a duty of extra care for minors, change the default settings from public to private, create more parental controls, and to ban geolocation for minors. We need to raise the age of the internet to 16. It's 13 now, and it is very easy for kids to simply lie and put an older birth date in there, and so it's rather meaningless. But the tech companies can engineer foolproof methods for age verification, and there are multiple suggestions that he gives for the tech companies. I don't need to bore you with those, but I just know it can be done, and they're not doing it. They want those young eyeballs, which also is similar to the tobacco industry that knew of the harms of smoking. The tech companies know about the ill effects of social media on kids, and sadly, they're not doing enough. Governments can and have passed legislation for phone-free schools. And then regarding the overprotectiveness and the lack of real-world experiences that our kids have, state and local governments should relax overprotective laws so parents can allow children unsupervised time without fear of being arrested or accused of neglect, and that has happened. State and local governments should encourage more free playtime in schools and consider the needs of children in zoning and create spaces for them to be able to play and hang out and do a little risky play. Also, we need more vocational education and programs that have been shown to help teens transition into adulthood. So now we're going to talk about what schools can do, and I am going to go through each one of these individually, so don't worry about trying to read this whole slide. So the first one is phone-free schools, and Haidt says that we should have phone-free schools all day long, bell to bell. Next slide. This is the only bipartisan issue that there is. Republicans and Democrats alike notice this crisis and want to do something about it. So this is an easy thing to advocate for and to talk with everybody, which is harder and harder these days. In fact, 45 states have passed legislation banning phones to some extent in schools. In this map, the green is bell-to-bell restrictions. Cell phones, smartwatches, tablets, all devices are locked up for the entire instructional day. The teal blue states, which includes North Carolina, means that there are partial restrictions, but it's not necessarily bell to bell. Dark gray means restrictions are under consideration, and then the light gray, or in white in this slide, means that there's no policies even under consideration. And this has happened very recently, and this is positive. I think we should take great hope in the fact that governments are doing this and schools are banning cell phones. In the next slide, I'll tell you what's going on locally. The Chapel Hill Carborough District banned cell phones all day for middle school, but the high schoolers can still use their phones at lunch. Durham and Chatham and Orange County schools, they have restricted them for the entire day. So that is what's going on locally. That is such a good question, and that is so true. And Ellen, as a teacher, can tell you that there is, yes, parents feel like they need to be in control of their children, and there was a lockdown 2 years ago in the Chapel Hill schools, and children were texting and calling their parents. They were not listening to the teachers who were instructing them in how to stay safe. It caused much more trouble than benefit, and we need to trust our educators, our teachers, administrators, school staff to keep the kids safe. You texting your kid is not going to keep them as safe as the school who has these policies can. Yes?
Also, the high school kids here order lunch to be thrown off at the school.
Absolutely. It is a nuisance. And yeah. Okay. So, thank you. Those are great points and so true. And then to the safetyism and overscheduling, overprotectiveness of children, local policies schools should become more, we need more recess, better playgrounds, and fewer rules. And the next slide, Jonathan Haidt and Lenore Skenazy, who wrote Free Range Kids back in 2009, started this group called movement called Let Grow. And their mission is to make it easy, normal, and legal to give kids the independence they need to grow into capable, confident, happy adults. Again, kids are receiving these messages that the parents or loved ones don't think that they are capable of doing things and that the world is a scary place. So they recommend that schools assign children homework of doing something they have never done before on their own after reaching agreement with their parents. And examples could be walking the dog, making a meal, running an errand. And this will increase the child's sense of competency and the parents' willingness, ability to trust that the children can do these things and then continue to grant them more and more autonomy. And the schools need more technical and vocational training classes, particularly to help these young men who are failing to launch. And we need more male teachers in the schools. This GIF had the children wiggling around, but the next section is about what parents, guardians, loved one, teachers can do. And so we can allow children more unsupervised free play, delay the age of getting a smartphone or any smart device, and allow kids more opportunities to engage in real world embedded communities, such as youth groups at houses of worship. I am not going to read these slides to you. This is all in there, and it's a lot, but basically these are specific limits based on age of screen time. 0 to 18 months, really there should be no screen time for these kids unless it's a FaceTime video call with family and the parent is right there with the kid. Then until they're 2 years old, 18 months to 24 months, the occasional educational program, but an adult should be with the child, watching it with them and talking about it. And there is data that shows that the smaller the screen, the more detrimental to the brain. So if you have a choice, let your screen time be on a big TV. That is better for kids than on a small screen. And then limited, the time can go up as they age. That is up to each family, but the recommendations are for an hour on weekdays and 3 hours or less on weekends. And we need to give kids more opportunities to play. There is a benefit to kids playing in groups with different ages. And we need to model better behaviors, as Ellen said. We need to put our phones away and use how to use the parental controls, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. And the next slide is for elementary and middle school age kids, and this is more of the same that I've been saying all along. Families can take a digital Sabbath, and we can all put our phones away for a day, and the benefits of this are remarkable. He uses case studies in the book that talk about how families are having a really hard time, or the children are having a really hard time, and they take the phones away from the kids, either because they've been at a summer camp that doesn't allow them, and the kids come back, relaxed and back to their own self, and they articulate that they feel better because they haven't been looking at the phones, but then they get back on it, and their behavior and mental health declines. And we could all benefit from taking a break from our phones. I know I'm guilty of being on it too often. And create more opportunities for kids to do things in the real world. And back to the collective action, if we can get groups doing these things together, it's if neighborhoods and play groups can be formed, then your kid isn't the only one without a phone. And then for high school, if we are waiting until they're 16 to let them be on social media, talk with them about that before you just let them into the wild west of social media. And give kids more opportunities to grow and flourish in the real world. And again, I'm not going to read this slide to you. It's all in there. Next slide, please. So what can we do? We can speak up and link up. Talk about this to your friends, your families, your colleagues, your congregation members. And there are lots of groups, and I'm going to go over a few of them that can help support these efforts. So the first is the Let Grow movement that I already spoke about. This website, that's the URL up there, has tons of resources for families and schools, including an independent starter kit to help kids on the path to, and parents for more independence. There are ideas for old-fashioned play groups and how to start neighborhood and community play clubs, and how just to advocate to your school administrators to implement more of these in your children's schools. This is Smartphone-Free Childhood. It's a clearinghouse of guides, resources, and tools to empower parents to embrace a phone-free childhood and to talk to their kids, other parents, school administrators, et cetera. And there are a lot of resources in this that I encourage you to look at. And the final one I'm going to highlight is Protect Young Eyes. This is an organization that advocates for greater safety online. It helps families learn how to be prepared, how to protect their kids, how to actually use those parental controls and turn them on. And they recommend hardware and software for all digital devices. And this is a Christian-focused organization. The final slide is for the Anxious Generation website. You don't have to buy the book to be able to access all of this information. Just type in Anxious Generation, and you can join the movement and get on their mailing list for their newsletters and updates. Each chapter in the book has a Google Doc that is updated with new research that is coming out every day. So those graphs that showed, through the year 2021 or whatnot on these now online on the supplements, they're through 2025. So they are constantly updating the information as research and data comes out, and it is just chock full of information and resources and tools that I highly recommend you check out. And you can become a member of the Anxious Generation movement if you want to. And remember, people used to smoke everywhere, and now you rarely see people smoking anywhere. We can do this. It's not too late. It feels daunting, but it is so important for our kids that we have to do something about this. And I applaud y'all for being interested in this issue today, and thank you for your attention. And we have a couple of minutes for questions if anyone has any for either of us, and we'll try to answer. Yes? Wonderful, thank you. If you didn't hear her, it's called the Blue Dove organization that has a Jewish foundation that's also got lots of good information about how to protect children. Yes?
Oh,
Come on up here, teacher.
yeah. Just thinking about the influence of Chromebooks that are required for students now. And
I have
again,
big thoughts on that.
I bet. Because, parent buy-in of taking away phones is one thing, but if students are on their computers all day, I'm just curious.
Right. I mean, unfortunately, they are becoming more and more commonplace. I think there's a lot of people in charge of decisions in education right now who necessarily have not been teachers in classrooms and have not had the educational background that would lead to the decisions that are being made. Teachers are not thrilled with it. A lot of parents are not thrilled with it. Yes, again, it's being marketed as a kind of play opportunity with educational components, but it really isn't, and it's still creating, again, the things I talked about, the immediate gratification, the stimulation of the visual, gets children used to doing that. It removes the social component of learning. So, yeah, those are my thoughts on it.
Any other questions? If you'll raise your hand, we'll bring a mic.
I was wondering about the soccer generation, the soccer, the basketball, they start at age 3 now. Is that play? They bill it as play.
Right.
But when it looks, and 3-year-olds it looks like play, but by 7-year-olds it doesn't look like
I'm a
play anymore.
self-confessed soccer mom, so yes, I have two girls who play, one who's playing soccer collegiately, so I did grow up in that world, and it is a really tricky line to walk for parents because there is a lot of good value in structured activities like sports. I think the detriment comes to when you are having the children spend more time on that and not providing also ample opportunities for free play. So, if the child's schedule looks to be like the adult-led coaching experience, or adult-led activity, and then, then they're also filled with schoolwork, then there's a lot of times not enough time for free play. So parents really have to be mindful of making sure if they are going to have their children involved in structured activities to also leave time for the playtime. There is social interaction that happens in activities like that, but again, it's adult-led. It's not free play where the children are initiating and the children are guiding the activities of the play. So it does not have the same value. The free play is still really important for the children to have as well.
I wanted to share that my daughter knows Taiwanese, and they passed a law in Taiwan mandating 2 hours of outdoor play. In Taiwan, they've recently passed a law mandating 2 hours of outdoor play for every elementary school child. And she seriously thought about relocating her children because they showed, when they passed the law, they showed the research as to why they were doing it. And it just blew my mind. So it can be done.
As opposed to here where we've actually reduced the amount of recess time in our schools, and we've also whitewashed our playgrounds so that they're super safe, so the children have a different play experience. So that's exciting. Yeah.
So I just want to mention, I think, the next coming risk, which is AI. And I'm currently caring for a 9th grader who fortunately is appalled that her 9th grade English teacher lets the kids use ChatGPT for their assignments. Now, the good news is the kid I've got is appalled by it, but the teacher appears to let it happen.
The AI introduces a whole nother level, doesn't it?
Another conference. We do want to thank Ellen and Ashley so much for this time together.